What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 47 of FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Steven Radford.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Steve. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
You know, I'm doing all right. It's been a bit of a tough week, but I'm excited because I feel like this is going to be a fun episode, right? You know, we're going to be talking a little bit about what we're playing. We got some great questions in the question block. It's basically a mailbag episode here, and we got some fun topics to chew on today. So I think this is going to be one for the history books. So I'm excited to get into that.
Should be a good one. Yeah, there's some really great questions. I'm looking forward to the talking point. I've been giving it some thought, and my mind just keeps going round and round in circles as to what I would want to do. So we'll get to it.
I have a couple ideas myself, but I am very excited to talk about all of that with you today, Steven. But before that, let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games Podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of June. They are Christian Oliveria, Christopher Valens, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Asobi, Mary Berry, Smilky Shake, Wakahula, and Zaid Ida. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. You're all the reals to the real, and we appreciate your support of this fine program. We've got a bunch of other stuff you can get over on that there Patreon. If you want to become a Patreon producer like they did, you can get your name read on the air. You can get early access to this and our sister show Nintendo Noise, and access to our exclusive Patreon podcast, One More Thing, where Steve and I keep the mics rolling and chat about what's going on in our lives. It's a good time. So if you want to go and show your support that way, that is, of course, greatly appreciated. But if you don't have any money to toss our way, that's, of course, not a problem. There's a bunch of ways you can get involved. Head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can get links to our Discord, our social. You can write into the show, questions@flipscreen.games, just like everybody did for the question block this week. However you choose to get involved, however you choose to get in touch, we appreciate you writing in. We appreciate you being a member of the community, and we appreciate you tuning in for this week's show. So here's my question, Steve, right? I'm of two minds here. We've got quite a few games on this What We're Playing list, and I'm like, do I want to talk about these games? Yes. But we have these great questions, and I really want to give them their due. I'm thinking we start with the questions, and we push What We're Playing to the end of the show. See what happens.
Sounds good. Yeah, if we don't get to it, we can talk about it next week.
I think that's the way to go. All right, so we're going to jump into the question block. This first one comes from... Now, I did this last time, right? Was it Scrubicious that we decided it was, right?
I think it's Scrubicious.
That's what I think,
delicious.
Too. And I asked, but we never got clarification.
They've not clarified.
But they wrote into the show. Yeah. You know, they sent us stuff to the P.O. box. So I feel bad not knowing.
They asked, as well as this question, they asked an off-topic question to me just on Twitter. Because I posted a picture of some pizza I made. And I had it with garlic mayonnaise. Okay. What do you dip your pizza crust in?
I don't
if anything.
It. I don't. I'm not a dipper. But I'm not like a big condiment guy. You know, like...
Oh, okay.
I will dip. You know, in the pro, like, you know, like I like a good hummus. You know, like I'm not opposed to dips per
hummus
se.
With some pizza's great,
right? You know, but like when it comes to like chicken, right? Like I don't do barbecue sauce with my nugs or anything like that. I take them straight up. You know.
Oh no, that's so dry then with that. Okay,
not if they're cooked well. You want the crisp on the outside and the you know the good, nice, well cooked chicken on the inside.
But the boot shape's like, you know, it's angled to get like...
You're not wrong.
You know,
but I want the
correct amount of sausage on there.
And I think the sauce, it makes it too wet, you know? It adds a moisture.
You know, I'll go for a crunchy, plain one in between. It's like a, you know, palate cleanser. Let's have some sauce, or I need that crunchy taste from a plain nugget. And
I respect it.
To the sauce.
Not for me. It's not how I roll with my nugs, but, you know, everybody's got... That's why, you know, different jokes for different folks, right? Mm-hmm. But anyway, we're gonna go with Scrubicious until you tell us otherwise, okay, bud? Or we could just say scrub, but that feels mean, you know? Anyway, Scrubicious wrote it and said, "How do you guys play video games in general during the day, and what games do you prefer?" So I was thinking about this. This is like probably a good conversation to have 47 episodes in, right? Because I feel like if you listen to the show regularly, you know, but if you're a new listener, maybe you don't know, right? Maybe you need a little bit of that kind of that boilerplate, like what kind of games do we vibe with, right? So yeah, I figure we'll go with this one.
Yeah, but I also feel like it changes on a regular
Sure.
basis, and the type of game I play also changes by device I'm playing on.
That's true.
Like I'm probably not. I'm probably if I'm booting up the PlayStation, playing this big single player blockbuster experience. If I'm playing on the Switch, it's probably going to be a Nintendo game that's a first party Nintendo title or an indie title that's the
Sure.
works great on a handheld.
Yeah,
So it definitely depends. The game depends.
I definitely am similar in that way, of course. And I think it's interesting because I definitely don't think that's the norm, you know? Like, I think more often than not, right? Like, I think people gravitate towards certain types of games, but I think you and I are both pretty. I think we have a fairly wide palette, right? Like, we each have genres that we don't vibe with and we steer clear of, but I think we both are open to more kinds of games than not. You know, like I am like certainly not like, you know, I wouldn't call myself historically a huge first person shooter fan, right? But like one of my favorite games of the year last year was Halo, right?
Halo
I
Infinite was great. Yeah,
love Far Cry 3 and 4.
I was
And
excited for. Oh, and I was really excited for Cyberpunk. But I'm not one that goes for like a competitive shooter.
right.
But if it's a good single player experience in first person,
But
then
shit,
I'm more
even
than willing to give it a try.
even that, I broke my own rule on that. I usually don't like that kind of game, but I really liked Overwatch, you know, for like 2 years, right? So it's like, and
Yeah.
then I kind of fell out of that. And it's, you know, I feel like there are a lot of genres that I like and I gravitate towards, right? Like I love RPGs, I love open third person open world action games, you know, like there are certainly things like that I keep coming back to, but I think and I feel similarly in terms of like pretty much any medium. I am constantly in pursuit of a well-balanced diet. You know, it's like I don't want to only play one kind of game. And I often find myself going from like, oh, you know, I just beat this big, you know, AAA game that took like 40 hours, or I beat this JRPG that took 100 hours, and then it's like I want to play a bunch of indies and like I want to try a bunch
Oh
of
yeah,
different
you need
things
something
and
smaller after that. You
palette
definitely need
cleanse.
something smaller after that.
You know, yeah, and like you said, it comes down to device in a big way too, where it's like, you know, sometimes I'm in the mood for something like, you know, like at night, right? Like I like to play on handhelds and play things that are like tactical and a little slower and like things that are more turn based and things like I love doing that in the evening, you know,
And those are great games to play, turn-based games when you're watching TV as well. It's like a
the TV game,
second screen device, the TV game.
of course.
They're wonderful to play because you don't really have to concentrate as much. You can watch what's going on the TV and then you can dip out to like do your turn and then come back to it afterwards. And a story heavy game when you're watching something else and there's a lot of dialogue is no good. So that definitely varies as well.
Yeah, and like
But I
sometimes
will.
like I like to play something that's like very, very gameplay oriented because I'm not interested in like I don't feel like engaging with the story and I just want to keep my hands busy and like that's gonna lead me to a different kind of game.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about this. Do I prefer story-driven games or gameplay-oriented games? Because they were talking about gameplay versus story on this week's Triple Click, and I think I like both equally. And I think some games both work well together. Some games it's very clear that it's story focused and gameplay kind of takes a bit of a back seat. And some games is like gameplay's the focus. Like I think Elden Ring tries to be both, but I just don't care about that story. I think it's crap. So the gameplay of that is what hooked me. It's what got me in, and it's what I stayed around for.
Elden Ring is interesting because I think it's one of those. It's very similar to me in a way to like Breath of the Wild, which is like not a novel comparison. Everyone says that, but I mean like specifically in the way that it tells a story. In that like I don't like the story to Elden Ring. I have been largely turned off by it with my limited experience with the game. And I didn't feel that way about Breath of the Wild, but
I'm gonna
Breath of the
buy you
Wild
I'm gonna buy
story.
you a filled finger. That's gonna be your wedding present. Just a filled
Don't get
finger.
me fingers. That's so gross. But the thing that I think is similar about, because like Breath of the Wild story is not anything to write home about either, right? But like I think they're both, the story comes from the way that you explore the world and express yourself through gameplay and exploration, and like it's the stories that you tell with yourself along the way,
Yeah,
you
it's the
know?
stories you make, which is
Yeah.
exactly what Todd's pitched Starfield to be, right? Like, yes, it does have this mainline Bethesda Game Studios style story in there, but really it's the end game stuff and the stories that you're going to create by like saying, "Oh, I went to this planet, I found this, I encountered that. Have you found that?" Like seeing how people took down certain enemies and things in Breath of the Wild, like how they shot that Guardian like last minute when it was coming for them, or like got parried with the shield at the perfect moment, or managed to flurry on the Lionel. Like there's so much cool stuff in those games. Everyone was sharing clips and snippets and things like that. It was so fun. I love it when stuff like that happens.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's I like the games I play vary wildly. And I think at the moment, and probably a lot of it is biased because I got a Steam Deck and it's like a new hot toy, right? I find a lot of my gaming is being done handheld again. For a long time, that's how I was. Um, with when I first got the Switch, it was like, oh, I've got a handheld device again. But I was working in an office back then, so I was taking it to work and I was playing it on my lunch break, and that was great. But then as I transitioned to working at home full time, I was playing handheld less and less. It was only for those like TV games when my partner's got the TV on, or I want to watch something, but I also want something to do with my hands, so I'll play a game. And I'm doing a lot more of that again with the Steam Deck. I really enjoy it. Like I've got Fall Guys installed on there, and runs beautifully. And I'll just have something on in the background while I'm playing because
Runs
it's
beautifully,
just
huh?
running
That's not what you
forwards.
said in the Discord.
Does on Steam Deck, doesn't on Switch.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I thought the other part of this question was interesting too. Like, how do you play them during the day? Like, I don't know about you, but I find like I have kind of like three phases in terms of like when I actually play games. Right? It's either like, uh, there's like the I guess four technically. There's like the rare when I'm really really invested in playing something and I'm like constantly thinking about it, and like I'll just steal away whatever time I can. Right? So it's like might be on the
Yeah,
lunch
that was my
break.
Metroid Dread weekend. It was like
Yeah.
I'm just not going to stop playing this game. I'm just going to play it all the way through. It was great.
Yeah, and like that I think can like the weekend mode is like a whole other thing when you're just like all like I'm going in a gaming hole today, right? Like I'm gonna play video games for 6 to 8 hours and be in a
Hmm.
cocoon and not talk to anybody and just engage, right? And like that's always kind of my favorite way to play, honestly. Like I really love long sessions like that and like just really immersing yourself in the experience. But I think the most common way that I play is definitely the after work, after we're done recording, and I have a couple hours to myself between, finishing that stuff up and going to bed. And it's like I spend a good amount of time in the living room, either playing, whatever game on the main TV or doing the handheld thing with something on. But that I usually don't really do downstairs. Like that's usually more reserved for, unless I am playing like a game that's like a TV game as my main game at the time. That's usually reserved for like nighttime for me, where it'll be like, my partner and I go upstairs and like, like to like kind of wind down a little bit, right? And like soft mood lighting, like I'm playing something on the Steam Deck or the Switch, or maybe playing like Magic the Gathering on my phone or something like that. She's like on TikTok or playing like logic games. She's like very into puzzles and stuff like that. And like I'll have
Oh,
like,
you two've got to play the escape room game together then. There's
that
no
would
way
be
you
fun.
cannot play
Yeah.
that with her.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I think like those are kind of like the major modes for me, but like I guess there's also like the content side of things, which is like a whole other thing, right? Where it's like you play
Oh yeah,
games
like
totally differently
do
when
you
you're
know it's
doing it for
great when
content.
you but when you find a game that you love that you can also stream
Yeah.
all the time. Like with Elden Ring, that was the main reason I was like able to play that game so much was because I was streaming it all the time, and it was like killing two birds with one stone. I'm having a great time with this game, and
Yep.
everyone seems to be enjoying watching it.
You
So
ever
it
gonna
was
finish that
awesome.
game? You think?
I'd like to. I really would like to. It's a long one though.
You gotta get back. You said it's like one of your favorite games of all time. You gotta beat it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you gotta beat it. You like started so many big games this year, got like 75% of the way through, but then you're like, oh, I'm good. All right, let's oh, did I lose you there? You back?
I'm here.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump into the next one. This next one comes from Eddie Road Dog, who wrote in and said, "What's up, Ed? How you doing, brother? It's been a while." He wrote in and said, "What is the future of DICE, as the studio had confirmed that they will only be working on Battlefield going forward? What about series like Mirror's Edge?" So this was one of the bigger pieces of news this week. DICE has announced that they'll only be focusing on Battlefield moving forward, and their studio head said that we are only focusing on. I'm sorry, it's this is Rebecca Kutaz, who's the new studio's new general manager. And they said they'll be focusing solely on Battlefield 2042 moving forward. And they said there's no time for anything else. This is what we want to do. In 3 years, we want to be the first-person shooter powerhouse that DICE deserves to be, and that is what we're going for. So I think this is an interesting one, right? So to take it back to Ed's question, kind of, what is the future of DICE? It sounds like the future of DICE is really focusing in on Battlefield and trying to make Battlefield a proper, the proper competitor to Call of Duty that I think it wants to be, and it has occasionally flirted with, but never quite cemented
It was
itself.
for a while, like the Battlefield 4, Battlefield 1 era. Like those two games in a row, they had two hits, and then 2042 came out, really terrible launch, and then like kind of had its lunch eaten by Halo Infinite. It was really not great.
Yeah.
I felt really bad for the developers, but it doesn't seem like it's really improved all that much. I've got a friend who's a massive Battlefield fan, and he's been really disappointed that they've not put really the content that people want and expect in these live service games into the game at this point. And Dice obviously did do Mirror's Edge, but I feel like that was an edge case for them. It's really been Battlefield and Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront. That's been the two games that they've really focused on. So I'm not surprised that they've come out and said this. I feel like everyone saw them as the Battlefield studio anyway, and the studio that gave birth to Frostbite for all of its pros and cons.
Cons, let's be real. Terrible engine. Truly terrible engine. Yeah, I'm not surprised by this. It just kind of like makes sense when you really just like think about it. I think like when you look at the games that they've been making, right? Like since 2005, really. I mean, a little bit before that, I guess, because Battlefield's been around since it looks like 1942 was the first one, right? So that would have been 2002. And I mean, since then on, the vast majority of their output has been Battlefield, right? Mirror's Edge was in 2008. We didn't get Mirror's Edge Catalyst until 2016. And, the game famously did not sell very well, and Catalyst, the original Mirror's Edge didn't sell that well, but it was critically acclaimed, and it was like a cult hit, and it was a game that people begged for a sequel. We finally got one. It didn't really land, it got mixed reviews, and it was just not, it never hit. It never found the audience that I think the folks that really like it wanted it to. And, that's just a tough place to be, right? Like as a AAA studio, there's not a lot of space for you to be putting out stuff that's like middling, it's like, why develop another Mirror's Edge when we've put out two Mirror's Edge and, neither of them lit the world on fire? The second one wasn't even very well received, right? Like, how many people are out there clamoring for another one versus the huge audience that exists if you get Battlefield right, and you can actually be, an alternative to Call of Duty, which is one of the most popular games in the world, and especially with all the negative press that Activision Blizzard has right now. I think if Battlefield...
And if you could be like on the off years as well, like
yeah.
if Call of Duty is taking a step back and a break,
right.
then we're not getting another Call of Duty next year. They've confirmed that, right? That if that is the case, and EA can get their ducks in a row and get a new Battlefield out on those off years, then they have a real good chance. But I feel like people were shocked about it because it's weird hearing a developer saying we're focusing on one game, but it kind of made me think we let some developers, like everyone seems to be happy with some developers focusing on a solo game. And then other developers, we seem to want a wide variety of things from them. Like someone like 343 only does Halo.
Sure.
They were set up just to do Halo. Playground Games, yes, they're going to be doing Fable, but up until now, they've only been known for Forza Horizon. And I think it's fine to focus in on exactly what you're good at, and like hone your skills and put out games that people enjoy and come to expect from you.
I think that as a concept makes a lot of sense when you're specifically talking about studios that focus on like multiplayer stuff too. Like it. There is, I think, something to be said for like a studio like, Naughty Dog, for example, right? Where it's like, oh, like, well, I don't really want to see them just like do Uncharted or The Last of Us anymore. Like, I kind of want to see them do something new, you want to see them be working on that next idea. And I think that when you're talking about single player stuff, like that is kind of the vibe. Whereas like with something like, Battlefield, it makes sense for the team that works on Battlefield to support Battlefield, right? Because they want it to be a platform. They want it to be a game that people play for years and keep coming back to. And, they want to, they want to be in a position where the main thing that their studio is known for is a very successful franchise that they can keep going back to and building on and build up that, that credibility, and I think that there are a lot of studios that's what they do, right? Like Psyonix, right? Like is like they do Rocket League. That's their thing. And yeah, maybe they might make another game eventually. But it's like that's their flagship product.
Or even like studios that focus in on a niche, right? Think about like Harmonix. They were the rhythm game company.
Sure.
And that's all they did. Now they make music for Fortnite or whatever. They're just a support studio, and it's really sad. But yeah, I see no issue with it. Yes, it would be nice. I think if the developers if the developers weren't coming out and saying this is what we want to do, and it was like being put in a pigeonhole like Activision did, right? Activision turned Toys for Bob into a support studio for Call of Duty. I can't imagine the developers there really wanted to work on that. It's probably not what they signed up for. They probably came to work on Crash Bandicoot and Spyro and 3D platformers and things like that.
Right.
But if it's the developers saying, yes, this is what we want to do, we're really excited about it, then that's only a good thing. I think if they were coming out and saying, oh, we've got an idea for a Mirror's Edge 3, but there's no time for it right now, then I'd be concerned because I would like to see what they have.
Yeah, but I also think that like there is something to be said, I think, right, where you come down to the fact that like, publishing games is a business, right? And you can't make something just because it's like, oh, it would be cool to make another one, right? Like,
no, but like, look how profitable, look at how well the Tony Hawk's remake sold.
Sure.
And it was just like, okay, we're closing that studio down. They're gonna just work on Blizzard.
Yeah, to me that's
now.
different though. Right? Like it's different because like you said, right? It's one thing to take a studio that's been built to successfully make a type of game. They've shipped that type of game. It's been successful, and then to gut it for parts and make them go work on something else. That sucks. But like the Battlefield studio being like, yeah, we just want to work on Battlefield, and like Mirror's Edge didn't really hit, and that's not. It's there's no future there, right? Then
How many people who worked on Mirror's Edge are still there? Like, that was a long time ago.
you mean the original?
Yeah, like the
Yeah.
original or the sequel. Like, that's a long
I mean, the
time.
sequel was
Even
only
like, if
that was only like 2 years ago.
6 years though.
Was it?
Was this 2016? You said?
Was it? Yeah. Oh, maybe you're right. Yeah. Either way. That's a good point too, right? Like the folks that wanted to make that kind of game, right? Like I would imagine anybody that's gone and gotten a job at DICE in the last, whatever, 5 years or whatever, right? Like you are going there because you want to work on first person shooters,
Well,
right?
it's like going and getting a job at IO, and then you're surprised that you're working on a game like Hitman.
Sure.
It's
like that's what we do here.
That's what you signed up for. This is
Yeah.
the type of game we make.
So I think with that in mind, right, there are some studios where it's like, I think all you want them to do is be like, what's the next like Double Fine, right? Where it's like, cool, like what's the next thing, right? Like what, maybe, yeah, Psychonauts, cool, come back to that. Like I'd love a Psychonauts 3 if that's what you want to do. But it's always like, what's the game that you're most passionate about making? And that's the game I want to play. And like, I think for studios that work on annualized franchises or that make games that are a platform, like it makes sense to become the studio that like, we want to be a premier S tier first person shooter studio. That's what we're trying to do. That's the kind of talent we're trying to attract. That's the kind of culture that we're trying to breed here. Right. And like, I think that's fine. Like that's ultimately a good thing for Battlefield and for Battlefield fans, and I think if you're the type of developer that like, is like, oh, I don't want to just work on Battlefield. Are you really at DICE? So that's, I think in this situation, probably a fine thing, probably a positive thing, because DICE, I think it's fair to say DICE has not really like been hitting lately. Like they've had
it's just surprising because they were really putting out some phenomenal games.
Yeah,
I feel like they were one of the first to introduce like ray tracing into their titles with that first NVIDIA.
Oh my God!
RTX card.
Remember, like how beautiful
it was like Battlefield
Battlefront
4. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, like both Battlefront games had their fair share of controversy and problems, and
like the whole pay to win thing with the second one, that was not great.
Yeah,
and obviously with 2042 just not severely lacking in content and having a terrible launch. It's not good.
With that in mind, I would say, I think hopefully, right, to put a pin on this, Ed, the future of DICE is what they're saying, and that they can get their house in order and become a studio that's capable of putting out, S rank level FPSs that community is ready to bite down on and really come back for. But because right now I feel like they're a studio that like doesn't have a super strong. Their flagship thing, their identity is Battlefield, and Battlefield is in a place where I don't feel like folks are happy with it. And, like, that's not where you want to be. You can't afford to be in that position. So, all right, let's jump into this next question. This one comes from Spring Heel Rick over on the Discord, who wrote in and said, as dicey as DLC is, what classic game can you think of that could have needed it? Not a remake, but what if right now someone went ahead and made DLC for an old game in that style? Which one would you go with? I would choose Comic Zone or Altered Beast. This is a really fun question. So if you could add
and it's really tough.
DLC retroactively to any game. Because that's the thing, right? Like I'm thinking like
what are we considering retro? Like, because that's where I have to.
Well, he said old game. So I would say any game from previous generations, I think is fair play.
Like as a kid, and probably still now, I'd have loved DLC to be added to like the very best Mario parties, like 4 and 5, back on the GameCube. Like additional boards with the mechanics that they had, with like the candy or being able to put things on the board. It was really fun. Those Hudson built Mario Party games were like top notch. And I also feel like some of the games that were put out in the past probably could have been DLC levels at this point. Like going back to like Sonic 2, Sonic 3, like Sonic 2. Oh, now we've added Tails in. And
they made some big changes to the engine.
They had that like additional cartridge, right? Where it was like the one that went on top of the
3
other
and Knuckles
on the Mega Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the 3 and Knuckles
That's
would be
DLC.
like the DLC. Like they did the DLC, but you had to buy like an extra bit for it, and it went on and then went into your thing. Like that was DLC, but on hardware before DLC existed.
Crazy times. Yeah, I think a couple came to mind for me. I think Tony Hawk could have been a cool thing, right? Like I could see them doing like kind of the Hitman thing, right? Where it's like, oh, it's all the levels from the past game made in the new game's engine. They would do
Oh
that
my God,
sometimes
yeah.
where they would have like secret unlockable levels and it would be like, oh, it's school from Tony Hawk and now it's back. And, so like, I think something
Yeah,
like
that
that.
would be great. Also, additional characters I think would always.
And they
be
always
good.
had the
Like, I
cool
feel like
unlockable ones. Because, like, in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, they had Spider-Man. In 3, they had Wolverine. And in Underground, they had Iron Man. And, like, it would be cool to have, like, all those. I think Darth Maul was in 4. It would be cool to have all those characters, like, in one roster, and, like, not having to pick and choose from game to game and things like that. And I think I could have also done with it maybe for some of the old Pokemon games because they always had like pretty good, robust. I mean, not always. That's not fair to say. They often had good, robust post game stuff, and I could totally see, like doing more of like the gold and silver thing where like, oh, you beat the game and then like you go and you can like go to the region from the original games and like go battle all the gym leaders and like time has passed and everything looks different. Like that's something that I think people would go nuts for, right? Like if you could just be like, okay, like you beat the game and now you're a champion, like travel to this region and go beat their league, travel to this region and and just kind of like have the game keep going and building on itself. Like I think that would be a really easy, cool thing. Yeah.
yeah. I also think fighting games would be a perfect thing, right? Tekken, for
Sure.
example. Like bringing all the characters and all of the levels, like they've done with Smash, for example.
That's why everybody loved Tekken
Maybe have
Tag
some more
back in
like
the day on the PS2.
crossover.
It was just like every character, and you're like, oh, this is the best. This kicks ass.
And I had like, I would have also loved it for that. Remember those stupid, goofy dance mat things, like for the DDR? They were like they were like roll up material, and so it felt like you were standing on like a bunch of paper and plastic bags. Downloadable songs for that would have been so good. Like Microsoft did it with Lips. Do you remember Lips with their karaoke like
Oh,
microphone?
that's so gross. Lips.
And they had like downloadable song packs on the Xbox 360. So I felt like they could have done something like that.
Yeah, I do remember that. Ugh, it's gross. Lips. It's no good. I don't like that at all. So, yeah, I think that's all I got. Do you have any other ones that you can think of?
Not really. Like I also feel like I'm not a massive fan of DLC on the whole. Like, it's
That's
very
why I'm
rare
trying to think of it more
I
like
bite on it.
expansion packs. Of like
Yeah, and
when it's like
they
a
existed
a
for like the games I
0.5 kind of
really
thing.
wanted. Like Diablo 2 got an expansion pack, Age of Empires got an expansion pack. Like a bunch of other PC games used to get them. Like they were a thing, the expansion packs. Then they kind of went away. And they weren't a thing on consoles up until like the Xbox 360 generation, I don't think. Yeah, weird.
Yeah, that's when it like really started in earnest. Like we had before that, it was
Yeah,
you just get like whatever the expansion that was
you
like
got what's
oh
on the
okay.
disc, and if there's like a new version that they want to put out, then fair enough. But I don't think they ever did that. I don't remember them doing it anyway. But I remember buying DLC on discs. Like I've got a copy of Shivering Isles, for Oblivion, the expansion for
Yeah.
Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, on a disc, and it comes with like all of the DLC for the game.
I feel like the
And you
the
put
best
it in, and
example of
it
those.
still works on the Series X. It's
No, it
crazy.
doesn't. That's
It does,
crazy.
yeah. It downloads the DLC
That's
on the
awesome.
Series
That's
X.
awesome. I think the example that always comes to mind for me is like the Sims expansions. Like that was like such a like
Yeah.
it was just a box copy of a second of like a new game, and like I remember
Well, World of Warcraft did that as well, right? And then
yeah,
they brought
Burning
this
Crusade and
subscription on top
everything,
of that. Yeah.
and I remember, God, that was a pain in the ass back in the day. I remember like when you would like install it on a new computer, it'd be like, okay, let me get my old World of Warcraft discs and install the base game, and then install Burning Crusade, and it'll take like 500 years, but I did it.
Can you imagine installing like the Sims 4 or something now, and like all of the expansion packs and stuff that you've got to go through and download and
It's got to be
install?
so
Like,
huge. Yeah.
yeah. Because I remember some of the expansions they did. Sims 1, they were fairly like, just like, oh, here's some additional things for your house. Here's
Some of them were
additional
crazy
stuff,
big though.
right?
Like there was like the Make It Magic one.
Sims 2, it was when it got really big there. Like you can now go into the city. Now you've got pets. Now you can like, there was nightlife. Do you remember that?
There were some of those in
and you could, like,
Sims
go
1
out.
though. Cause like
That was Sims 1.
Yeah, cause the Making Magic one was you'd basically go to like a fucking wizard like world, and you could get like a dragon egg, and I remember you'd have this little baby dragon, and like mine like killed the mailman, I think, and like yeah, you could like go to this whole other map, and like there was like a lot of stuff like that even on some of those, and I think there was the downtown romance one, you could like get extra dates and things like that, and there's a bunch of them.
So officially, there was Living Large or Living It Up in Europe, House Party, Hot Date, where you could go downtown and go out on a date.
I remember that one.
And you had an inventory, and you could give gifts to other Sims with a revamped relationship system, including short and long term relationships.
Yeah, man, huge
Vacation, which was called
Vacation
On Holiday.
was good. I remember that. Yeah, I remember that one too. I think Pets was one of them too, right?
Unleashed was pets.
There you go.
Added dogs and cats that could be treated as Sims rather than objects. And it introduced gardening and expanded the original 10-lot neighborhood to 40. Superstar, you could become an entertainment figure and had representations of famous personalities. And then Making Magic, which was the one you were talking about.
That was like my...
You go to a magic town.
That was my favorite one. Because I remember I did the cheat so I could have the big mansion up on the hill, and I made like a monsters family basically, and they were all like witches, and they had like a dragon and like a weird werewolf dad, and like I don't know, I forget what all the different stuff was, but it was fun. I made it as like spooky as possible.
You know, the craziest offshoot of The Sims was The Herbs, which
I
only came out on
loved The
console.
Herbs, dude. I had that on
Only
PS2.
came out on console.
Yeah.
It was so weird. And
Like you
I've
want to be
just
friends
read
with the
the
Black Eyed
music was-
Peas?
Yeah, music by the Black Eyed Peas that was translated into Simlish. Like,
I think
what
that was the first time they had done that, where they had real artists do it, because they did it. Katy Perry did it at one point too. Like, I think there's a couple artists that have done that now.
Good
That's
God.
so funny. Yeah, that's a fun one. It's a good question. So we're gonna move into our talking point here. So this one came from Skaxophone over on Twitter, who wrote in and said, "You're given an infinite budget and tech support by a studio of your choice to make your dream game. What studio? What is the game?" So I'm interested to talk to you about this, Steve. I have a couple ideas here, and I'm interested to see how you interpreted this question. So, like, your quote-unquote dream game, is it a game that you yourself are coming up with, like, a new IP, or are you making a dream game in another franchise? Like, how did you...
I saw it as like a new game, a fresh idea.
Okay.
And not like, oh, I'd really like Fallout 6 made by Obsidian.
Okay. Because I have two pitches that are like that. And I have some ideas.
Okay, well, let's hear them, because I've got hardly any idea for like a game. I feel like if I had an idea for a game, I'd have made a game, and like that's the problem.
Steve, we gotta make a game. I got ideas. I just can't code. I tried. I can't do it. All right. So yeah, I'll start with my ones that were ideas for existing franchises, and we'll start there. So my first idea was I would love to make the Pokemon game of my dreams. And the two studios that came to mind for me were Atlas and Intelligent Systems. And Intelligent
Really,
Systems.
I feel like so many more studios would have the technical prowess to make the game.
How do you mean?
Like, I feel like those studios would capture what you want in terms of gameplay and story and like aesthetic.
Yeah.
But I don't know that they are like technical studios.
See, I mean, that's the thing, though. I don't care about that, right? Like, I don't think that's what Pokemon needs to be better.
But
I
I
really
feel
don't.
no, but I feel like a big thing, a big part of a lot of people's issues with the latest Pokemon, like I'm talking about Legends, is the fact that it's got technical problems. Like
Sure.
I feel like other than that, like it's a fantastic game. It just needed additional polish and probably a team with more experience or more time to come in and help out.
Yeah, but see, that's my thing, right? Is like, I don't think that either of the studios I just mentioned have that problem in their last games. I wouldn't look at Persona 5 Royal and be like, oh yeah, like this game needed more technical prowess, right? Like it's like maybe like it could run at 60 FPS or whatever locked, but it's like that game was also built.
It does now.
Yeah,
it does
right,
now.
and it was built with the PS3 in mind and everything, so it's like I don't think it was like a lack of ability, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean, maybe it's a time thing because they were working on the game for a very long time,
right.
and they've had like now another 4-5 years since its release originally.
Yeah.
And now they're putting out like a next gen. It's now been on 3 generations of consoles, just like GTA 5.
Yeah.
So it's like it's when's the next one coming?
Hopefully soon.
That's
I mean,
what I
hopefully
want.
we're getting the announcement at the concert event later this year. So that's the thing, right? And in this scenario, I have infinite budget and tech support. So like I'm in a perfect scenario to make the game however I want to make the game. And I feel like same thing with intelligent systems, right? Where it's like anything that you could point to about Fire Emblem that could be better, I would say you could probably chalk up to either like hardware
I think
or
it's the
time.
Switch. Yeah. Yeah.
Because the game looks good.
But I feel like you've got to pick one studio though, because Andy's question was tech support by a studio.
I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, Intelligent Systems had assistants on Fire Emblem. Like, maybe they collaborate. All right, if I have to pick one, I'll pick Atlas, okay? I think they could both nail it. But essentially, I picked that team, right? Because that's basically what I want, right? Is I want a Pokemon game that is a deeper turn-based strategy system, and that's already like the thing that's great, right? Is like it already works. That's already the cream of the crop. I think really all you'd need is them to have good difficulty levels, right? And that was something that Persona 5 Royal, at least, I didn't play 5 to completion, did really well. Where like there's like the punishing difficulty, which I forget, might not be called that, but the hardest difficulty, right? I really enjoyed, and I thought it was really challenging, and it made me think. And there were a couple fights I really had to like work hard for at certain parts of the game. And I would love to see them bring that.
Can you
to
switch
the
the difficulty in real time in that game? Because that was one of my main gripes with 4 Golden. Once you pick the difficulty at the beginning, it can't be changed.
You can change it mid-game. I don't think you can do it. I think you have to do it like after, like in between.
Yeah, like when you're like the social bit, not in a dungeon.
I think if you're in a dungeon, you can even change it, but like it'll be like after you wipe, or like if you're not in a fight,
Right,
like
okay.
mid-fight, you can't be like, oh, I'm gonna turn this down.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Just to like finish him off at the last minute. Yeah.
Yeah, but like if you're like having trouble with a fight, you can knock the difficulty down. That's my memory of it anyway. But that's like the thing, right? Is like what I really want, I think, in a Pokemon game, aside from just like difficulty levels and like all those kinds of basic things that I think people have been asking for a long time, is I do want a game that's really, really rooted in story, and that like is something that, has like multiple supporting characters and like a narrative that I'm really excited to go through, and like having like a social sim element maybe, and like having like romance options, or having like the ability to like do some of those more like, non moment to moment gameplay stuff that often makes JRPGs sticky, and I think like when I think about the JRPGs that like I've really, really connected with, I was talking about this on Nintendo Noise the other day. Those are the things that make them stick with me, right? Or like characters that I really fall in love with, the ability to make choices, the ability to feel like my actions are impacting the world overall. Like I would love to see the world of Pokemon get that treatment and get to like have a
I
game
feel
that
like that is every JRPG, and it's just
sure.
Pokemon that doesn't get it because it's like
Yeah,
my
because it's on a
first
treadmill.
JRPG.
And that's the
Yeah.
thing, though. Not every JRPG gets it, right? It's the really good ones. There's plenty of JRPGs that don't engage in those kinds of systems and don't have as much style or,
But
like
the really successful ones that aren't Pokemon
that stick
all
out.
seem to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like that's really what I want, Like I want to see a studio that isn't Game Freak or, a Pokemon game that has the ability to kind of like break out of some of those things that like I think have made it feel, limited. Like it always feels like it's
Yeah.
like it's just it doesn't have as much time to develop or breathe, and like the level of attention to detail that like Persona 5 put into like its menus, right? And how stylish everything is. Like I'd love a Pokemon game that had that much time to breathe. Like that would be a game
Like after
I'd
like
love to
the
helm
after battle animation in that game. Oh my god, so good.
you know. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I could see that. Is it thematically the same game as a Pokemon game of old, or are you introducing more adult elements? Are we going to be fusing Pokemon together and chopping their heads off?
No. I'd say I'm fine to definitely get away from things that are quote unquote traditional, but I feel like I'd love to like have the ability to explore the world more, and like not literally explore the world. Like I love the way that Shibuya feels alive, right? In Persona 5, where it's like you unlock a new part of the city and there's like all these new places for you to explore and you can meet new characters and like,
Then you go on vacation.
Yeah, that's true too. And like, stuff like where it's like, oh, I became friends with like the fortune teller that I met downtown, or I went to the church and I met this person. Like, I like having the ability to like I like the idea of a game that like allows you to really like have it feel like a lived in world and not like you're just talking to NPCs, right? Like I want the characters I meet to have personality and backstory, and I want to be able to like see them grow and change and help them, and like
Not just called Bugcatcher Billy or Youngster
right, and like
Tom.
and like tapping into some of the like emotionality that has been shown in like the Pokemon anime or the manga and like some of those things, right? Like it's a rich world for storytelling, and it feels like it's kind of like gotten so on the rails that there's not enough room for that anymore. Even the first game, right? Like, or the earlier games, I should say, like have more little side stories and like just things that happen, rather than like, oh, it's this game's big event and then there's this one and then the legendary and okay. It's like it just feels like it's gotten so formulaic. It would be really cool to see them like I don't think the core gameplay needs to change, right? Like the Pokemon battles and collecting, like that has always felt good and it still feels good, and there's ways to continue to build and innovate on that as RC has shown us, but I think like story and character and vibe, art direction, style, those are the things that I really feel like it is lacking in. And I think like a studio like Atlas or Intelligent Systems, that's shown that they can make a game that has that great loop, that has those cool social sim features, that has the ability to give you other things to do in the world that make it feel more lived in than just the core gameplay loop.
Mm-hmm. What else have you got? Because like all I could think of was like loose ideas for games, and they're all stuff I've spoken about before. It's like merge this with this, and it's like it's not too interesting. The studios I thought about were really just like studios I considered to be technically top of their game. People like turn 10, like what they've just shown with Forza Motorsport, I think is like next level. If they can get ray tracing running at 60 frames per second on track, it's going to look amazing. That's a big if, because obviously the game doesn't exist in anyone's hands yet. Insomniac, I feel like on the PlayStation side of things, their open world exploration in Spider-Man and the way the like linear gameplay was in Ratchet and Clank, second to none as far as I'm concerned. Those games just felt amazing. So I think if anyone's building a platformer, they should be taking cues from either Insomniac or Nintendo. I feel like those are the two companies that make 3D platformers the best at this point. Double Fine did a great job with Psychonauts 2, but I feel like, yeah, Ratchet and Clank, nothing's come close to it for me.
Yeah, I mean, Insomniac, there's something in the water over there. You know, I think the most interesting thing about them is how much they're able to churn out really, really solid, like 8, 9 level games, but they never seem to hit the 10. I don't feel like they've quite done that yet, even though Spider-Man's like a 10 for me, but it's like I'm biased.
I feel like I feel like some of it is they need an editor to go in there at the end and just be more liberal with the like cutting blade. Because I feel like the biggest complaint I've heard about Spider-Man are those lab puzzles, right? That no one seems to enjoy and everyone skips.
They're not fun.
Just take them out. If they weren't there, I feel like, and it was more about the linear gameplay and like the focusing on the exploration of the city, and not having to go back to the lab all the time to do that shit, then great. I mean, I've only done 2 of those puzzles, and I didn't think they were that bad, but I didn't really care for. I didn't really care for them, but I did love the puzzles they put into Ratchet and Clank, the environmental puzzles with where you're playing as Clank, and it's like you've got to move the balls around. Did you do many of those?
Yeah. I mean, I did. I did all of any of them because I always want to get the trophy, right? Because I need that platinum. So I played all those stupid things in Spider-Man, even though I didn't care for them. So you've identified those studios. You can't think of something you'd want to do with them, though? Like, there's not, like...
Not with, like, I'd say give them a franchise, right? Like, I think it would be amazing to see what they could do with, say, a Fallout that's not a Bethesda Fallout. Because I feel like Bethesda took Fallout and then took out a lot of what was interesting about it for Fallout 3. And Obsidian put some of it back in for Fallout New Vegas, and like some of that remained for Fallout 4. But a lot of the role playing was taken out. You were just you. There was no real like you had the special system, but it wasn't like or even like the studio behind Disco Elysium. I feel like getting them to do like a turn-based Fallout game would be so cool.
I'd love to see them do if you were gonna give them like a license thing. They should make a D&D game. You'll finally have a good Dungeons and Dragons game.
We're getting a good Dungeons and Dragons game. There's like Baldur's Gate coming out from Larian.
That's true.
Who make Divinity Original Sin. That's gonna be phenomenal when it comes.
Yeah, I'm sure that will be good. But I mean, like, I feel like
D&D proper, like you just want it to be called Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, and not an action game, not a top-down like Diablo like kind of like it's like
that's not what Baldur's Gate is. That's Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. Baldur's Gate
true. That's what I know.
Traditional CRPG. Like it's back to its roots. It is D&D. You're rolling dice basically. And that's what Divinity Original Sin is. Yeah. If you want to play those games, let me know because I'll play Divinity with you.
I would do that. Fantastic game. Yeah, we could do that. Yeah, and like don't get me wrong, I'm interested in that for sure. And is that the one that's in early access?
Baldur's Gate is in early access, yeah, and I refuse to play it until it's finished.
It's Baldur's... No, and that's the traditional CRPG, though. You're saying.
Baldur's Gate 3, yes.
What's the other one CRPG I'm thinking of? There's another game that's like... It looks like Dragon Age, basically, where there's like a lot of like... You pick dialogue options and like...
It's just called Dark Alliance.
Okay.
So it was Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance back on the PlayStation.
But now they're just calling it Dark Alliance.
Yeah, it's now just called Dungeons and Dragons Dark Alliance.
And isn't it Dark Alliance 3 though, or is it not?
No, they rebooted it. It's just called Dark Alliance, and it does look like a Diablo game, but then you have like the large faces talking.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like that game's
But
been
yeah,
in
that
early
one's
access
just
for
called Dark
ages,
Alliance.
and it looks
Yeah.
really good. That's not
Yeah,
out,
I
right?
don't know. I kind of want to feel like it is out. I played a little bit and I got confused with the menus, and then I gave up.
Is this
I
the
kind of
game?
want to just play Dark Alliance 2 again, like the old school ones from the PS2 era. They were great.
Okay, so it did come out. Oh, it did not get good. It did not get good scores.
Nah,
Is this
it
the game I'm
wasn't. It
thinking
wasn't.
of though, or no?
Maybe not. I have no idea what game you're talking about. I presumed it was that one because you were talking about Baldur's Gate.
I don't think it is. No, this isn't it. I don't know what game I'm thinking of. This is gonna drive me crazy. I gotta ask.
Ever play any of those old like Infinity Engine games?
No, it was
From
only
like
the
Black
only.
Isle?
No, not really. So okay, wait. So I got one more. So this is more original because it's not like let's just take an existing video game franchise and like make a version of it. That's what I want. I would love to take a team at BioWare and make a Avatar: The Last Airbender game. Actually, I have two licensed properties I would fuck with from them. Avatar: The Last Airbender or X-Men would both be good. And I have a very clear pitch for how this works. So with
do you feel like anyone has like, before you get onto it, sorry, do you feel like the teams that make the games that you liked are still there? They're still at BioWare?
so
Or do you
some
feel
of
like
them
they
are,
went and moved on?
but I don't think that matters. I think that like so there's the whole mantra, right, of like studios don't make games, people make games, right? So it's like the name BioWare doesn't necessarily like mean anything if the people change. That's true to some degree, but I also think that to believe that wholly ignores the reality of how franchises work, right? Where like, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko created Spider-Man, right? But there have been a lot of really good Spider-Man stories that they had no part in. And like,
No, yeah, of course, but like, look, in terms of gameplay, Fallout and Fallout 2, not the same game as Fallout 3. A different studio,
different
they bought the
studios.
franchise and it took over. But I don't know. I feel like if the same people were working on it, we probably would have got Fallout 3 that looked like the first two Fallouts, and we can see the game that they made. It was Anthem, and I don't think people liked it all that much. And then the sequel to like the latest Mass Effect game didn't land very well, right? Like,
Yeah,
do
but
you
like,
feel that they're capable of making the game like the old school games that you love?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think that all of those, like, there's a lot of reasons why those games didn't turn out, right? And like,
Yeah, like Anthem is like has a bunch, and obviously
yeah,
Jason outlined it in his book.
So does Andromeda. So like, and I think the thing is, right, like in this scenario, right, like I want to make a game that's inspired by those games, right, the good ones. And there are a lot of people just like me who love those games, think they're the best games ever made, and would be like, I just want this but new. And it doesn't, like, would I love to have a couple of veterans from those games come out and be on the team? Absolutely. But I also don't think that that's necessary to make the same kind of game well, personally. Because that's the thing, right? Like, you look at, like, Mario, right? Like, how many folks have had a hand in making great Mario games, right? Like, there are some IP that it's like you can only have it made by the original person, but I'm also not necessarily trying to do that, right? Like, I'm thinking, like, I want to make
that's fine.
game in the style,
I get.
And
I also feel like it's worth like pointing out that if people like you grew up playing those games, loved them, and then a handful of them turned into developers and then wanted to make those games,
right? Exactly.
They probably would have wanted to look to go to a studio that made those games in the first place.
And that's the whole thing for me, right? Is like in this scenario where I have infinite budget and I'm running the show and I can attract the right talent, then yeah, I absolutely think that's a possible, and not only possible, absolutely doable. And that's my hope for Dragon Age 4, right? Let's, Dreadwolf, let's go, baby. But for Avatar, I feel like X-Men's an easier pitch, right? Like, you could easily have it be like you choose to either be a member of the X-Men or a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, Brotherhood, and you are at school, you're learning to control your powers, you're going through this whole story, there's a conflict between the two sides, like, it's basically that game, I think it was like X-Men, I forget what it's called, but there was a game that was supposed to be this, and it was just hot garbage, like, it was just not a good game. I think BioWare could easily crush that. Avatar, I think, would honestly be more interesting, because I think you could very easily have a similar structure to the way that Dragon Age Origin works, where, like, you choose at the beginning, you're like, okay, like, you're an avatar, you're the new avatar, and you decide, do you start as a firebender, an earthbender, an airbender, or a waterbender? And then the whole first game is literally you becoming the avatar, going to the different four nations, learning how to control your powers, and, you know, like, you get the 4 different fighting styles, and then something happens, and that's, you know, the end of that conflict, and it sets up the next game where you have total control over your ability, and then you can start exploring the whole world, and, like, there's so many things you can do in that universe because you have such distinct landmarks and cultures, and, like, there's the whole spirit realm of it all, and it's like you could go way far back in time and have it be pre-war, you could have it be not during the war, because that wouldn't work if you want to be the Avatar, but post-war, and have it, like, in the more, like, Korra, like, future era where it's more steampunky. There's, like, a lot that you could do there, and I think the whole Dragon Age approach of letting you pick one and then decide on their personality and have it be, like, an unvoiced character with, like, a ton of dialogue options so you can really kind of granularly control, like, who is my avatar? Are they, you know, like, stern and serious? Are they jokey and lighthearted? Like, I want to be able to really get in the minutia of, like, who my character is. And, like, you know, that's another core element of every Avatar franchise, right? Is, like, they have, like, a team of characters around them. They have, like, the love interest. They've got the best friend. They've got the villain who becomes a good guy, right? Like, all those kinds of things. And, like, you can go through that same process of building out a squad of folks around your character, having some really meaningful supporting cast that can, like, follow you on your journey, and, you know, and kind of just, like, do what they did for Star Wars with Knights of the Old Republic, but with Avatar. And I feel like that would be a fucking slam dunk. And I would love to do that. And in addition to BioWare, I would want to also have Brian and Michael, the co-creators of Avatar, want to have them executive produce. You know, they got to sign off on everything. They got to make sure we're keeping things, you know, true to the spirit of the lore and everything like that. But I feel like I would nail that. I read the books, you know. I got their deluxe creator's guide, and I read all about the creation. I'm locked in. You know, I feel like I could helm that vision well.
Mm-hmm. You ever play KOTOR 2?
No, I've only played KOTOR 1, and I didn't finish it. I tried to play it, like, years later, and it was, like, a little, like, it's a little dated. Like,
Oh, they're doing the remake, though, aren't they?
I'm
They've done the
very excited for the
remasters that's
remake.
come out. Yeah, the remasters come out on
Switch.
On Switch, yeah. Well, KOTOR 2's coming to Switch as well, but that I was curious because that's an Obsidian game. As to whether there was a difference between, like, the BioWare version and the Obsidian version.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of folks I think that 2 is better, but I couldn't say.
Yeah. Yeah, well, two is like a proper Dungeons and Dragons style D20 system game. It's very weird.
It's Obsidian's whole
Star
thing.
Wars Dungeons and Dragons game. Yeah.
They love.
Yeah, it is, and they do it so well.
D&D.
Them and Larian do them so well. Them, and also the studio that made Disco Elysium. I think it's Studio Zam or something like that. Really, really good. Like, I feel like at Disco could, like, the team behind Disco nailed it with the choices and the level of things you could do.
Perfect.
Like, playing Hobocop, you just get in the mindset.
I want every game to give me that level of role-playing opportunity, right? Like, that's the thing. And that's the problem, is people want voice protagonists, and voice protagonists are the enemy of good role-playing.
No, I agree with you.
You just
I
can't.
did like the voices in Fallout 4, but yeah, I agree with you. I feel like removing them for Starfield is the correct choice.
You have to, I think, to really make it work. To like, unless you're gonna go be and like, we're gonna voice 10 fucking options to every question you ever encounter. Like, it's just not. You get stuck in the whole like Mass Effect thing, where it's like, are you a good guy? Are you a bad guy? That's your two options.
It's also really boring to hear them talk sometimes. Like, I've read the text on the screen. Just like give me the response back. Like, I know what I'm going to say to you. I don't need you to say it again.
Yeah. So yeah,
that was a really good question. Really good question.
Yeah, great question.
Sorry, I had terrible answers, but yeah, really good question.
You wouldn't even let me get through my pitch. You're like, do you even think BioWare can make the game? It's like, let me have my dream, Steve. You know, let me have my dream. You can't even come up with one. You're like, but I'm going to poke holes in your dream.
I'm sorry.
You rat bastard. Yeah, this is a great question. A bunch of great questions today. Thank you to everybody who wrote in. I really like doing these grab bag kind of like question block episodes. So make sure you're writing again for next week's show because, hey, it's a quiet season. So keep them coming. I'll do as many of these as y'all folks want to listen to. These are a good time for us. So thank you guys again for tuning in to this week's episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast. Remember, if you want to show your support, head over to patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. You can get the show early. You can get exclusive access to One More Thing. You can get your name read on the air. You can do all kinds of cool stuff. But if you don't have any money to toss our way, head over to FlipScreen.games. That's our website where you can find links to our Discord, where we've got a fun, inclusive community where a bunch of fun, cool gamers like you are out there talking video games, keeping the conversation rolling after the episode ends. All kinds of good stuff over there. We'd really love for you to come and be a part of it. You can also follow us on Twitter at FlipScreenGames. Keep up with all the stuff we're doing wherever we're doing it. You can also write into the show, questions at FlipScreen.games. We have a questions thread on the Discord every week. We throw it up on the Twitter sometimes as well. However you choose to write in, we would greatly appreciate it if you would send a question, your ideas for a main topic, your thoughts on anything we discussed today, or if you just want to say hi. You can do that too. We always appreciate hearing from you. So that's my challenge to you, listener. If you've never written in, if it's been a while since we've heard from you, drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. So, for the FlipScreen Games podcast, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week. Take it easy, baby.